Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here, Canadian Looney, looking forward to a wacky, wacko Wednesday. Who knows? Like, Wednesdays are very often wild. Trudeau is always supposed to show up on Wednesdays. Who knows if he will? He dodges that as often as he can. Anyways, we've got some videos that we're going to get right into here, and we've got some great stuff. It's a good show. Lined up. I'd like to say hello to Kirk, Mr. Pickles, Savage Silence, Matt Jodry. Who else do we have here that's... Mike Malosh, what's going on? LJ, my man, what's shaking, baby? It's hot in Nova Scotia today, man. It's hot in New Guysborough, anyways. Yeah, so we'll just jump right into it, guys. Let's get into this. Oh. Got one piece that I forgot to do. There we go. Now we're ready to go, guys. Let's kick this off. Let's get it going. We have some interesting pieces to show, for sure.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Wiggle and squirm as you might, it is really hard to put lipstick on a pig.
When I'm Prime Minister, I will keep my promises.
WTF. Here. I know this place is where I am. No other place is better.
The one we call Canadian. Canadians.
Gentlemen, beam me aboard.
You know I am Canadian.
Thank you, Mike. Cool, bro. All right, guys, we're going to drop into this piece from our friends at Rebel News. Definitely check out Rebel News. Check out subscribing and becoming a member of their channel. They do great stuff. Let's talk about it.
Hey, how are you? I'm feeling pretty good today. I saw two by-elections last night, one in Manitoba, one in Quebec. In Manitoba, the Liberal Party, which is in government, Justin Trudeau, got around 5% of the vote. Single digits. That's like fringe party status. Just incredible. I mean, it was always an NDP stronghold. The Liberals were never particularly strong there. But my God, that's got to scare any Liberal MP in the West. And Montreal was in its own way more astonishing. See, that seat in Manitoba, it had been an NDP seat for decades, actually. But the one in Montreal was about as heartland for the Liberals as it comes. It would be like Calgary in the Reform Party or the Conservative Party history. Montreal, that is where the Liberals are. The riding was called Le Salamar-Verdun. In the past, it was called Le Salamar. That was Paul Martin's riding when he was finance minister and the prime minister. Then it was David Lamette's riding. He's the disgraced former justice minister. These are the kings, the titans of the Liberal Party, and this was the safest seat possible, incredibly. The Liberals were run out of the district. I say run out of the district because I was thinking of what the Liberal candidate herself did last night. She gave a speech and then she ran out of the room never to return. I mean, she hadn't formally lost yet, but it was going so poorly. She said a few things and then she ran out. Here's the CBC trying to come to terms with that.
We're all trying to figure out why Laura Palestini gave that speech when she gave that speech. You got any insight? What's the vibe and the reaction at the headquarters after that?
Well, David, I can tell you one thing. As much as she was energetic in her speech, she was also energetic in leaving the party. She immediately left as soon as she gave that speech. She did a few steps saying thank you to the volunteers, turned around, went out the door, and of course we followed her. Thought maybe she was just getting some fresh air. No, she got in and drove away.
Now, early in the night, the NDP were doing very well. In fact, it was sort of a three-way race. The Bloc Québécois, who finally won, the Liberals, and the NDP. They did well as the explicitly pro-Hamas party. They had a pamphlet. Their candidate had a pamphlet talking about Gaza, and the only flag on it was not the Canadian flag, not the Quebec fleur-de-lis, but rather the Palestinian flag. And he did very well. And you might recall that some Muslims in the Liberal Party had a boycott on the Liberal campaign, saying they weren't going to help Justin Trudeau because he wasn't pro-Hamas enough. This is shades of what we saw in the United Kingdom in July. They had their parliamentary elections on July 4th, you might recall. And whereas 5 Reform Party MPs, including Nigel Farage, were elected on the right, well, 5 pro-Hamas MPs were elected on the hard left. 4 of them were Muslim themselves, and the 5th was Jeremy Corbyn, a hardline anti-Israel I'd call them pro-terrorists, really. And they ran on a Gaza platform. Remember some of the victory speeches by those guys in the UK? Terrifying.
Go home, find every brand and every product that has been supporting Israel and Zionism from the beginning of time and throw it away. Throw it away. Put the list on your fridge. Tell your children when you go to the shop to buy sweets, do not buy this and do not buy that. That is the least we can do. We have been complicit indirectly for too long by electing these Zionists, these unjust leaders.
Well, we were only a couple thousand votes away from that happening in Canada, and don't think that won't happen one day. So a disastrous night for the Liberals. And I say again, I mean, 9 years or more into a party's mandate, by-elections are going to be a way for people to express their dislike with the incumbent. It's not that surprising that in the dying days of a regime, people use by-elections to punish them. But the depth of the hatred for the Liberal Party is something we haven't seen before. Justin Trudeau lives in his own world, though. I really believe that he follows his father's mantra. I don't know if you remember, but Pierre Elliott Trudeau, his dad, once said MPs are nobody 100 yards off Parliament Hill. They're nobodies. And I hate to say that's right. There's 338 MPs. How many of them would you recognize if you bumped into them? The answer is pretty few, because Parliament itself has fewer and fewer powers as it's all absorbed by the PMO. There's a couple of cabinet ministers who are good for show and tell, but the number of people who actually make decisions is very small, and most of them are not MPs. So you're a regular MP. You're going to be terrified by what you saw last night. And if you remember when Justin Trudeau was accosted on the beach by our alumnus, Cian Bexty, Bexty said, "Are you avoiding your MPs?" And I think Trudeau very much is terrified of his MPs. I mean, imagine what they had to say to him when he saw them yesterday, but that was before the election result today. Here's Trudeau walking into Parliament yesterday. He had someone film him like he was very confident and strong, but look at the stress on his face. Look at that forced grin. Even a trained thespian and dramatic actor, a high school drama teacher, substitute drama teacher like him, even he couldn't quite hide the stress and anxiety. Even though he doesn't care about his MPs, they do control his future. They could, if they wanted to, band together and boot him out. Look at him make his entrance with his personal videographer yesterday. Look at his face. Take a look.
Ready?
Hello, I got
See you. See you.
How are you doing?
Good stuff. Merci.
Trudeau is such a fit.
Let's go.
Yeah, it's not going well there. They really are down to the palace guard. Trudeau sounds like, I don't know if you remember during the Iraq War when the head of PR was talking about the mother of all battles, and I don't know if you remember, but Saddam Hussein's spokesman, even as the tanks were closing in on Baghdad, was talking about how they were going to beat the great Satan and the little Satan. That's what the Liberals sound like now. Just, oh, we're confident, and oh, Canadians are truly with us. I think that they're lashing out, the Liberals, and they've been doing so for a fair bit. Here's a story I should have mentioned when it happened a week or two ago. Talib Nur Mohammed is a member of parliament of no account. He's one of these nobodies that you wouldn't recognize, other than he was famous for buying a house and flipping it, buying a house and flipping it, buying it and flipping, buying and flipping, which of course distorts the market, makes it hard for people who want to buy a house to live in. He's a speculator, he's a profiteer. He was who the Liberal Party chose to run in Vancouver, and I think that's a slap in the face to people trying to find affordable housing in one of the most expensive cities. But he's someone of no account. He is sort of the deputy to the Heritage Minister, so he has some say over a program that's very important to the Liberals, which is subsidies to journalists. In fact, they just recently increased the subsidies that the Trudeau government will pay to journalists. Now, I think it's about $30,000. It works out to $30,000 per journalist in the program, which is pretty much half their pay. And Talib Nur Mohammed was getting very frustrated that the media weren't as loving as they should be. He responded to a criticism online by a journalist. And this journalist is with Post Media. The journalist didn't really say anything that interesting, just was criticizing Mark Miller on something. Like, it didn't even mention Talib Nur Mohammed. But here's what Talib Nur Mohammed, the Liberal, said in return. Your paper wouldn't be in business were it not for the subsidies that the government that you hate put in place. The same subsidies your Trump-adjacent foreign hedge fund owners gladly take to pay your salary. Holy cow. Does he have some anger issues? Trump-adjacent, foreign. He's so furious. And of course, he doesn't like money. He's very much against rich people owning newspaper companies. He's all for using, flipping houses to make a quick buck. But he's very mad, and he's basically telling a journalist, "I'm your boss, know your place, and you'd be nothing if it weren't for my largesse." It's really what he's saying. There really isn't any other way to interpret his message. Absolutely atrocious. A threat. I mean, why don't you just add on and be careful we don't audit you at the CRA? I mean, why not do that since you're throwing your weight around? What was the most incredible thing was not that this was an attack on a journalist with a threat. That's sort of known. That's sort of what the whole subsidy program is about. I like to say that the CBC is owned by the government, but the newspaper journalists are just rented by them. And it's worse to be rented because, of course, you have to keep proving that you're worth the subsidy. At the CBC, someone like that Post Media journalist would just be fired, though. Anyways, the worst part of it was that the rest of the media was completely silent about it. They were fine with it. The Canadian Association of Journalists didn't say a word about this outrageous threat. The Canadian Journalists for Free Expression, PEN Canada, none of them had a word to say because, yeah, they absolutely agree when whoever pays the piper calls the tune.
It's the news event of the year. Canada's most controversial premier sits down with Canada's most controversial journalist, and everything is on the table. Come watch Ezra Levant one-on-one with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith in front of a live studio audience in Calgary. Nothing's off limits. Nothing's held back. Questions that would make Justin Trudeau invoke martial law. Answers that will make Stephen Guilbeault pee his pants. You're not going to want to miss this one. but you have to be there in person at the Rebel News Live mega conference in Calgary on October the 5th. Tickets are limited, so drop everything and go to rebelnewslive.com right now. Special discounted prices for Patriots and special extra high prices if you're with the CBC. Go to rebelnewslive.com now.
Receive information.
All right, gang, we're going to drop into some committee video like right now. And in about, I'd say 30 minutes or so, we'll jump into question period and kick that off. But for right now, this is a pretty interesting committee meeting. I was watching this earlier this morning and last night. Wild stuff.
Anderson did not provide what the committee had asked for, and so this morning, as per the motion of the committee adopted on July 17th, I presented a report to the House about Mr. Anderson not responding to the committee's request for the information to be provided by the deadline. The other thing that I want to say is that I have planned a subcommittee meeting today to get direction from the committee. On Thursday, as you've seen in the notice, we have Minister Boissonnault coming back, followed by a subcommittee meeting for approval of the work plan that I hope to get to today. Next week, just for the sake of and the benefit of the committee, we haven't put the notice out, but there has been work and the clerk has notified witnesses so that we can continue with the misinformation and disinformation study. As committee members know, we've done quite a bit of information and gathering with respect to that study. There were some witnesses who, because of technical issues, were not able to come before committee, so I've asked the clerk to reconnect with those witnesses. Right now, they're on hold. They're aware that we want them to come, but again, it's going to be up to the committee to determine whether we maintain and keep that schedule. And just a reminder for the committee before we broke in June that we do have the RCMP information tool gathering draft report that needs to be dealt with and presented. The report has been written, but we just haven't got to that at this point. So we will have to, at some point during this session, I believe, get to that important study and present it to Parliament with the recommendations that are contained in it. Now, speaking of direction, I can't stress enough how difficult it was for myself as the chair and the clerk and the analyst to do some planning in the last session. So I am going to need that direction from committee. That's one of the reasons why I put that subcommittee part of the agenda for today. I've started with committee business in public because there are numerous and have been numerous motions that have been put on notice. And so effectively, if this was a game of poker, I want us to splash our chips in, all in, and start presenting your motions if you want them to be debated on the floor, and then through the subcommittee, we can get direction from the committee on what the priorities of those motions are, and we can do the work of actually gathering witnesses and doing the important work of this committee with a plan. It was difficult, as I said earlier, to plan for anything in the last session. So that's why I've decided to start today's meeting with open committee business, and not just the motions that are on notice, but if anybody else has anything else that they want to discuss within the committee, let's get to it now, and then we can start planning for the future meetings. Okay? So, that being said, I'm going to start with Mr. Barrett, I'm going to go to Ms. Khalid, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Cooper. Mr. Barrett, go ahead. We are in committee business.
Thank you, Chair. Given that the Prime Minister has appointed Mark Carney as Chair of the Liberal Party Task Force on Economic Growth, and this position shields Mark Carney from Canada's public disclosure and conflict of interest laws, as he is not deemed a public office holder, and Canadians have a right to know about the financial and corporate interests of individuals shaping economic policy that impacts their everyday lives. The committee called Mark Carney to testify for 3 hours within 14 days of this motion being adopted.
I'm going to accept that motion as being in order. Do you want to speak to it? If I could, Chair. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we have a conflict of interest regime in this country that is that was set up so that Canadians knew that whatever interests an individual who was a designated public office holder had, they know what those interests were. And then conflict of interest screens should be set up, or divestitures can be taken. But in the case of Mark Carbon Tax Carney, we don't know. We don't have the full picture of what his holdings are, what his financial interests are. So he's making, he's advising the Prime Minister, and I understand he's going to be holding cross-country pre-budget consultations, and he's been hired by the Liberal Party. And the only reason that that can be inferred from this is to avoid the conflict of interest regime. And even this past week, we had an announcement from the government, $2.14 billion in a loan to a company called Telesat, just days after Mr. Carney's given this new job advising the Prime Minister. And Mr. Carney is a personal friend of the head of that company and has a financial interest in it. So again, this is information that Canadians need to know. While we have advocated, I have advocated for the government to bring Mr. Carney, have him sworn in as a public office holder, have him subjected to the Conflict of Interest Act, so Canadians know. Like, look, I wouldn't pick Mr. Carney to advise me, but that's a choice that they've made. They're the government. That's their purview. But the manner in which this is being done appears to be done in such a way to subvert the conflict of interest regime. There are specific provisions in the Act with respect to ministerial advisors. And how do we know? How do we know what the framework is for Mr. Carney's employment, his interactions with ministers, his interactions with the Prime Minister versus his interactions with the Prime Minister, who is also the leader of the Liberal Party of Canada? So it's about transparency, it's about clarity, so we can get some there is some information that we have through publicly open source about the interests of Mr. Carney, but we need the full picture. So it's important for Canadians to get a good understanding of that. The best way to do it would be to have a conversation with Mr. Carney.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. Could be a bit of a challenge. We'll have to, you're calling for a 3-hour meeting. We're going to have to make sure that we check with resources to make sure that they're available for 3 hours, but I understand that's what your motion calls for. So, Monsieur Villemure, sur la motion qui est proposée par Monsieur Barrett.
That's the motion proposed by Mr. Barrett. Thank you, Chair. Welcome to the committee. We are happy to see you once again. Same thing to other colleagues.
In a couple of minutes here, Ikra Khalid, actually, we'll just...
I have a few...
Skip the block, Quebecois guy.
That...
A member of the committee.
That will be clarified
Shortly.
shortly.
Subject to confirmation. Okay.
But I'm not on the
We'll get into Ikra Khalid here very shortly.
Well, you're after Mr. Fisher. Ms. Khalid, go ahead, please, on the motion.
Watch this, guys.
Mr. Barrett.
It's brutal.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I love to see a motion presented to Elon Musk on Twitter before it's presented to our committees. I think it's a wonderful way to conduct democracy. It's a weird way, to be quite frank, to conduct democracy here. And you know, speaking of weird, we've had a very, very weird summer with Pierre Poilievre and his Conservatives. It's quite strange. I'm so sorry, Mr. Green. I can't hear myself over what you're saying.
Ms. Khalid has the floor. Please go ahead, Ms. Khalid.
You can J.D. Vance them. Don't J.D. Vance me. I don't want things to get weird, Mr. Chair. I apologize.
Let's have some decorum, please, and whoever has the floor is the one that's going to be speaking. Ms. Khalid, go ahead.
I'll just wait for everybody to chime down, Chair, if that's okay.
There's going to be side conversations. Members are going to be talking amongst each other. Just going to ask if it does get loud, just step back a little bit, if you don't mind, please. Go ahead, Ms. Khalid.
Thanks very much, Chair. I mean, it's not, this kind of behavior is not unprecedented. We've seen it before. We've seen a lot of distraction. And I think that...
Man.
Go ahead, Ms. Khalid, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, this is quite uncomfortable for me to make a point here when members are clearly talking over me, Chair.
Well, I encourage you to make your point. I'm not sure he's talking over you. He was talking to Mr. Caputo. As I said, there's going to be some side conversations here. Please go ahead, Ms. Khalid. And if it causes problems for me, then it will cause problems for them. So it's not causing a problem for me. I'm listening to what you're saying, and I know that the clerk and the analysts and everyone else is. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just turn to you so that I'm not distracted, if that's okay. So
immature.
We saw over the summer, Pierre Poilievre had to remove an advertisement because it contained stock footage of Russian fighter jets doing a training mission in Canadian skies, Serbian school children, and homes being built in Slovenia. Pierre claimed not to know anything about the far-right group Diagolon when he spent a lot of time snuggling up with them. And he was photographed with them and some of its members in the spring, and he had previously denounced them for comments made by their founder about his wife a couple of years ago. Pierre and his Conservative Party have faced criticism during this summer for calling the Holiday Inn lavish and swanky, whereas he himself had hosted a fundraiser there in that exact same location earlier in January. We've had members of Parliament in that caucus, such as Michelle Ferrari, who had to delete a tweet after claiming that in Peterborough, the cost of living crisis has driven parents to traffic their own children. Michelle was found to have posted a doctored global news report that edited out most of the video because it was critical of her. There was a weird case of online social media bots that were posing to be Pierre Poilievre supporters and were trying to boost the Conservative Party's messaging about a rally in Northern Ontario. In recent days, reports have come out about a right-wing Indian media personality calling for the Indian government to wage an information campaign in support of Pierre Poilievre. The FBI has seized a Russian-backed fake news site which posted anti-Trudeau and pro-Poilievre content. And I'm listing all of this, Chair, because this is exactly what this motion is about. It's about a whole bunch of misinformation, disinformation. It's about a whole bunch of nothingness to delay the work that this committee has put in. And Chair, you know how passionate I've been about the work on our social media study, which got shelved. You know how passionate I've been about the work on the misinformation, disinformation campaigns that our country has been dealing with respect to our elections, with respect to foreign interference that Mr. René Villemure put forward. I think
we'll
that
jump
we
over
need
to question
be
period
better.
in about 5
I think that we
or
need
8
to move
minutes.
past the politics and move on to what genuinely helps Canadians with respect to what is the mandate of this committee. And this is not it. I mean, if we're talking about the specifics of the motion, talking about the Liberal Party hiring or bringing somebody on as a volunteer to provide advice on economics, on the economy, somebody who has significant contribution and expertise on the economy, not just here in Canada, but across the G7. What are we trying to achieve here? or I should correct, what is the Conservative Party trying to achieve here? Are we trying to malign yet another person by dragging them here before this committee? Are we trying to malign what? What is the objective? Are we trying to move our country's economy forward, or are we not? And in that same breath that, the Conservatives have taken this motion with, well, what about the flip of that coin? From my understanding, Jenny Byrne is also in the exact same scenario as is Mark Carney by all wording of this motion. So why is she not part of this motion, unless this motion is presented to be a partisan hack on what we are trying to make sure as a collective between all parties to make sure that our country is thriving, to make sure that our country is progressing. So I'm really wanting to understand what the crux of this motion is about. Is it to, one by one, malign and shame anyone who has contact with the Liberal Party, regardless of their expertise, regardless of their aptitude, regardless of their experience and wealth of knowledge that they can bring to make our country better? Or is it just basically conservative hack politics? And I think, Chair, that we can do a little bit better than that.
She's so
and
disgusting.
I would, in the interest of being nonpartisan and really exploring what this motion is trying to do, then want to bring in the flip side of that coin and say, hey, why don't we bring in Jenny Byrne as well? If we want to bring in Mark Carney, sure, you guys have your day. He knows how to handle himself, I'm sure. I am not speaking for him, and I don't think any of our members are on this committee.
She just
he can
spoke
speak
for
very
him.
well for himself, given his track record over his entire career for being the expert that he is. But let's even out the score. Let's say that if there's somebody brought in by a political party who is brought in to give expert advice on an issue, then let's talk about Jenny Byrne and her expert advice on grocery prices and why the Conservatives feel that it is necessary to talk out of both sides of their mouth when it comes to grocery prices. So, to be fair, Chair, I think happy to support this motion with an amendment by including Jenny Byrne for the same amount of hours that that this motion presents for Mark Carney, and I'm happy to propose the specific amendments that we can add to this motion. But again, I would say just as much as Mark Carney being brought in by the Liberal Party, whether he's paid or not paid is not a question. But he's brought in by a political party the same way that Jenny Byrne has been brought in by a political party. Let's bring them both in and figure out, as I've been saying for many, many, many months now, Chair, how do we make sure that our rules and regulations make sure that there is no conflict of interest, that there's no violation of lobbying, that there's no violation of that public trust that we really should be holding a lot dear to our hearts? How do we ensure that we are talking about policy and not people? So let's broaden the horizon here. Let's talk about, on both sides of the coin here, let's bring in these people who have been appointed with whatever expertise they have, with the exact same time that the Conservatives are proposing, and let's have it out. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Khalid. I have Mr. Fisher next on the list on the motion. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'm in complete agreement with ICRA. She asked a rhetorical question, though. She just said, are we once again trying to malign a future witness at this committee? And I would say that your answer in that is these nicknames that get tied to people that are already maligning character. They remind you very much of a former president of the United States. And I got to tell you, ICRA asked, we'd like to think that we're better than that here in Canada. But when you start the motion note or the preface to the motion note with nicknames attached to people's names, you're already maligning a potential witness. I thought I heard the possibility of an amendment or more amendments coming later, but I would be interested in hearing from some of the other members as to whether they support going down the road of asking someone who may or may not be a chair, may or may not be may or may not be an advisor. I would say that I would like to think that every political party is smart enough to have advisors and bring smart people in to help advise them on how their party would proceed. And I think it was Renee that made a comment very similar to that. I'd be very surprised. We know the Conservatives have advisors. We know the Conservatives have people that attend their caucus.
But also, his lasting
their leader. And I can only assume that the other parties do the exact same thing. Why wouldn't they? It makes...
All right, guys, I don't mean to be rude and interrupt this jerk-off Fisher, but we're going to get straight into question period right now. It's kicked off, so let's take a peek at that.
Terrebonne, celebrating its past 2 decades. It has been working to prevent social exclusion and support vulnerable young people aged 18 to 30 facing homelessness. Under the exemplary coordination of Cindy and Mariette.
Before we see Poilievre and possibly Trudeau, but we'll see.
First to suffer from the housing crisis. Café de Rue Solidaire is also a self-help network offering psychosocial support, storage, food assistance, and much more. Last year alone, they provided prevention and support services to over 1,000 people. Today, as we celebrate this anniversary, we recognize their immense contribution to Terrebonne's community and reiterate our support for their important mission. Thank you, Café de Rue Solidaire, for your invaluable impact on the lives of our young residents of Terrebonne. The Honourable Member for Ottawa-Vanier.
Speaker, behind every paycheck, there's thousands of Canadians working hard to ensure accuracy and timeliness. I rise today as a proud supporter of all payroll workers, many of whom are women dedicated to the vital role of payroll. From September 16th to 20th, the National Payroll Institute is celebrating National Payroll Week. And to mark the occasion, President and CEO Peter Tsanakis is here in Parliament today. Thank you to the hard-working Canadians handling payroll tasks, including the processing of withholding tax, essential to our taxation system, and the funding of public services.
The work of these payroll experts contributes to the strength of our economy and the financial well-being of workers from coast to coast and enables our government to provide the support Canadians need. Congratulations to everyone involved in this important work, and thank you.
The Honourable Member from Parry Sound, Muskoka.
Well, September marks the end of another stunning summer in Parry Sound, Muskoka. But what is often referred to as the playground of the rich and famous is not the reality for too many of my neighbours, Mr. Speaker. We have master carpenters who build beautiful waterfront cottages but can't afford a home in the town they grew up in. We have resort staff who welcome guests from year over year from all over the world, but they're worried about how they're going to heat their home this winter. We have cooks who prepare these incredible meals, but at the end of the month they have to visit a food bank to feed their own family. These are the folks who call Parry Sound, Muskoka home, not just July and August, but all year. These are the honest, hardworking people who sent me to this place. And this summer I heard loud and clear from them that they want change. They need change. They need a government that will let them keep more of their hard-earned paycheck. They want a government that won't punish them for heating their homes and driving to work. They want a government where common sense is just simply common. Mr. Speaker, they are ready today for a Conservative government that will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
The Honourable Member from Vancouver, Granville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As this parliamentary session begins, I rise to recognize the important work that firefighters did throughout this summer from coast to coast to coast. From protecting our communities to saving people's lives, firefighters are true heroes who put the country's interests ahead of their own. On behalf of the constituents of Vancouver Granville, I want to thank BC firefighters and Vancouver's Fire Rescue Services for all they do. Their dedication and courage inspires us all. Mr. Speaker, firefighters are vital pillars of our community who safeguard us from the devastating impact of climate change. They are there to save lives in our homes or in public spaces. We know that we can count on their bravery and commitment to protecting Canadians. They show up for us at community barbecues, they are there in our homes, and they're always there to make sure that we're okay. That's why we've always been there for our firefighters and why that will never change. From important measures on cancer treatment to unprecedented funding for training and recruitment, we're just getting started. Thank you to those firefighters, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The honourable member from Markham Unionville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Member of Parliament for Markham Unionville, a beautiful, diverse riding with people of East and Southeast Asian backgrounds, I rise today to extend my warmest wishes to all on the occasion of the Mid-Autumn Festival, also known as the Moon Festival, that was celebrated yesterday. For a Chinese, Korean, Japanese, and Vietnamese community, this festival symbolizes family, gratitude, and hope. Across our country and the world, families will gather to share traditional mooncakes and light lantern for prosperity and good fortune. Every culture across the world has an itinerary of a harvest festival, whether it be Thanksgiving, Vaisakhi, the Mid-Autumn Festival, or Chuseok, among many others. These festivals demonstrate our unity and shared human desire to celebrate abundance that the harvest brings. To everyone celebrating in Markham Unionville and beyond, I wish you a happy Mid-Autumn Festival. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Bellechaste, Les Eight Chemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, what is the purpose of the Bloc Liberal Coalition? It's to keep the Liberals in power. Do people know that the Bloc has voted to save the Liberals nearly 200 times? Do they know that the Bloc voted for $500 billion in inflationary spending, which added 100,000 public servants, all with Quebecers' money? The Bloc must stop pretending to help Quebecers and support us in changing this government. The Bloc Liberal, well, because of them, for the past 9 years, we've had record spending, no balanced budgets, a debt that's doubled, and public services in disarray. The Bloc votes to waste Quebecers' money. The Bloc voted for the largest expansion of the federal government ever in this country. How did the Prime Minister convince the Bloc to support his most expensive, disastrous, and centralizing government in Canadian history? There's an alliance between these two that remains suspect. So the real question is, who does the Bloc serve, Mr. Speaker? The Liberals.
The honourable member from Mississauga, Erin Mills.
Mr. Speaker, I am so delighted today to welcome my Mississauga Erin Mills Women's Council and Youth Council to Ottawa. These brave Canadians are doing phenomenal work engaging with constituents to help me advocate on the issues that matter most to us and ours. Over the past year, they have held events and workshops for health and wellness, mental health, career development, entrepreneurship, food insecurity, and more. All the while, they continue to contribute to our community in their professional, student, and volunteer work. Today, they have brought their advocacy to Ottawa to witness our democracy in action and will meet with officials to share their vision. I want to take this opportunity to thank every member of these councils for their dedication, their leadership, and their commitment to our community here in Mississauga Erin Mills. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I could ask all members,
I'd like to ask all members to keep things quieter so we can hear the statements by members.
Keep it quiet so we could hear the members make their, because I know we all want to hear from the honourable member from Oxford.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes up, cost up, crime up, and now time is up. Right. The NDP leader claimed he would be a voice of opposition, but for the past 2 years, he has sold out Canadians by supporting the Liberals who are hiking the tax on our food, doubling housing costs, and who have unleashed crime and chaos on our streets. Following his media stunt, he refuses to state whether the NDP will vote to force a carbon tax election at the next opportunity. The truth is that the NDP have voted for the carbon tax 24 times. Wow. They have been a part of this Liberal problem. They have been there every step of the way. Canadians need a carbon tax election now to decide between the costly Liberal NDP coalition that will hike taxes on your food, punish your work, and take your money, or a common sense Conservative government that will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Let's bring it home. Bring it home.
The honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes up, costs up, crime's up, and time's up. Canadians are fed up with the corruption, self-dealings, and conflicts that define this rotten Liberal government. The latest example is the Prime Minister's decision to hire Carbon Tax Carney as his economic advisor, conveniently employing him through the Liberal Party to avoid conflict of interest disclosures. Every day, there are new questions about conflicts surrounding Carbon Tax Carney. Just yesterday, we learned that Carbon Tax Carney is negotiating with the very Liberal government he's supposed to be advising in funneling $10 billion taxpayer dollars to an investment fund owned by his company, Brookfield. This is an outrageous abuse. Enough of the Liberal corruption. Canadians deserve a carbon tax election, and they deserve one now.
If I could ask members to please take their seats so that the Speaker could see the Honourable...
I'd like to be able to see the Honourable Member for Argenteuil, La Petite Nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to take this opportunity today to congratulate Simon Haneuse, a 24-year-old man living with autism spectrum disorder. Simon was hired through the Canada Summer Jobs Program by Initiatives Biodiversité, a nonprofit that protects endangered species throughout the Laurentians. Recently, Simon took part in the rescue of a painted turtle that had been hit on Route 329 in my riding. He also took part in the rehabilitation of a turtle named Hope, and on Friday, she and 2 of her hatchlings were released at Solar Lake in the municipality of Gore. Mr. Speaker, Simon's experience shows just how essential the Canada Summer Jobs Program is for including young people experiencing social professional integration difficulties. Bravo, Simon.
If I could ask again for all members' attention, because the honourable member from Nunavut is going to be speaking in her original language, and so you might want to install your earpieces to hear the honourable member from Nunavut.
Mr. Speaker, not treating my trauma resulted in coping skills that harm me. I thank Johnny Ningungat for sharing his faith with me.
Nos interprètes, je devrais dire, est-ce qu'ils sont capables...
Can the interpreters hear us now?
So are 2 languages not enough for us to get confused on? Like, how many languages... Again, Lori Idloud, take her or leave her. I don't care. But, like... Let's start speaking Mandarin in House Commons. Wait on that. It's foolish. Okay, the audio is messed up on their end. That's not on my end. That's all them.
If I could ask for her patience.
Stupid stunt. hard to watch what they're doing, man. This is all Greg Fergus. He would have made the managerial decision to allow this to happen, and move on, guys. Sorry to be a little frustrated, but man, oh man, like, they just keep screwing everything up.
So if I could ask for all members' indulgence, we're going to ask the honourable member to start one more time. If it doesn't work for the translation into French, what we will do is that I'll come back to the member before the end of the period required for SO31s so that she can make her statement, but hopefully we'll work it out by then. Hopefully we'll work it out by now. So thanks for all members' patience, and I ask the honourable member from Nunavut to start again.
What a mess, guys. This is a total disaster.
Miss Speaker,
Embarrassing.
not treating my trauma resulted in coping skills that harmed me. I wish to thank Johnny Ningyungat for sharing his faith with me. For people in recovery, I speak to you, and I hope that you keep strong in your journey. Robin, I love you. Lloyd, I love you. Your strength inspires me. I thank the Bruce Oak Recovery Center and the family of Scott Oak and his family for establishing the center. Relapse, I learned, has 3 stages. It affects the mental, emotional, and physical. I hope those in recovery and their loved ones learn to recognize these stages so you can avoid reaching physical relapse. Not only have your lives been saved, you are learning to love and live life in recovery. I hope more Nunavut mute seek help as my loved ones did. Thank you.
Jeff?
The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. On behalf of the Bloc Québécois, I'd like to thank the citizens of LaSalle et Mar-Verdun for placing their trust in Louis-Philippe Sauvé. Mr. Sauvé made only one election promise to prove himself worthy of that trust. And I've known Louis-Philippe for many years. He'll keep his word. People have sent a clear message by choosing an MP who uncompromisingly defends the interests of Quebecers in Montreal Southwest, an MP who shares their concerns about housing, climate change, and the cost of living, an MP who ran a positive campaign, for example on French language issues, rather than one based on fear and division, an MP who campaigned intelligently, addressing voters with smart, realistic proposals. Above all, citizens have chosen an MP with a heart, in tune with the aspirations of the people of LaSalle et Mar-Verdun, and courageous in the face of adversity. Louis-Philippe Sauvé, your place is here with us on the Hill in Ottawa. Welcome home and congratulations.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Carbon Tax Carney is just 9 days into his role as de facto finance minister, and he's already cashing in on his conflicts of interest to enrich himself at taxpayers' expense. Yesterday, we learned that his firm is about to get a $10 billion sweetheart deal from his friends in the Liberal government to run his fund. You can't even make this up. Every day, there are new questions about his conflicts. Just days after his official appointment, his close friend, the CEO of Telesat, got more than $2 billion of your tax dollars to build a broadband network that other firms could have built for half that price. While Canadians struggle to put food on the table, it's never been better to be a well-connected Liberal. It's time to come clean. How much does Carbon Tax Carney and his firm at Brookfield pocket in management fees from taxpayers in this new fund? And if they don't plan on answering us, I'm sure the Ethics Commissioner can shed some light on the brazen corruption of Canada's unelected finance minister who's gunning for the PM's job. Right. In the meantime, they get rich and Canadians get fleeced.
Right. The honourable member from Winnipeg South.
Mr. Speaker, Phil Fontaine, one of the greatest Indigenous leaders in Canadian history, will be celebrating his 80th birthday. He rose from poverty and the cruelty of residential schools to challenge discrimination and colonialism at the highest levels of political and religious power. As National Chief, Phil Fontaine attained apologies from both our Parliament and the Vatican for their destructive treatment of Indigenous children, and played a key role in negotiating the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement. Under his leadership, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission paved the way for a national dialogue on healing and justice. Fontaine helped to reshape how Canada confronts its past, promoting understanding, respect, and mutual recognition. His legacy will be the inspiration for a new generation to continue the reconciliation journey toward a fair and inclusive future for all Canadians. I invite this House to join me in honoring Phil Fontaine's lifetime of service and achievement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions orales, oral
Here we go.
questions.
All right.
We're
We're
all
all
Leader
set.
of the Opposition.
Finally, there we go. Pierre Poilievre in the batter's box.
We've just learned that the Bloc will be voting to keep the most costly Prime Minister and most centralizing Prime Minister in history in power. A government that's doubled the cost of housing, doubled the national debt, increased the cost of groceries, broken our immigration system, pushing Quebec to the breaking point. How can the Bloc abandon Quebecers to prop up this Prime Minister, the most costly and centralizing one in our country's history? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Once again, Mr. Speaker, we see the Leader of the Opposition is only concerned about his own political interests and not the interests of Canadians and Quebecers. That's why we're going to keep investing in Canadians. We're going to be there for Quebecers with health care, dental care, more child care places, instead of proposing cuts and austerity, which we know the Conservative leader would
Trudeau
impose
showed
on
up.
everyone. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Canadians' interest is in cutting taxes, building houses, fixing the budget, and stopping crime so that Quebecers can bring home bigger paychecks and pensions that will be enough to afford housing and food. That's after 9 years of the Liberal Bloc coalition. They've doubled the debt, doubled the cost of living, and broken our immigration system. Why is the Bloc propping up this expensive and centralizing government? The Honourable Prime Minister. Once again, we see the Conservative leader believes in slogans, but not in Canadians and Quebecers. He doesn't want to invest to help people with dental care. He doesn't want to be there to help our seniors, to help young people. He just wants to cut programs. He voted against our climate action, against checks that people need, but he wants nothing to do with that. He's obsessed with his own thirst for power. We're concerned about Quebecers and Canadians, and we're working for them.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The NDP leader sold out Canadians to sign on to a costly coalition that doubled the debt, doubled the housing costs, sent 2 million people to food banks and 1,800 tent encampments. He voted 24 times for the carbon tax. And since he did his dramatic video, he's refused to answer 40 times whether he'd vote non-confidence. Now that he knows that the Bloc is going to keep the Liberals in power, he'll stand up and claim that he's voting against. Mr. Speaker, why won't the NDP stand up when it counts so that we can end this costly coalition and elect a common sense government?
Before the Prime Minister takes a crowd, I'm going to ask the Honourable Member from New Westminster, Burnaby, please, to only take the microphone when his voice is recognized.
This is not
The
going to
Right
change.
Honourable Prime Minister.
We need to get rid of him.
Mr. Speaker, once again, we see that the Leader of the Opposition enjoys his political games, enjoys chasing after his own political interests, and has not a second to care for Canadians' interests. He's actually in a bad mood because inflation has come down for Canadians. He doesn't care about their interests. That's why we're going to continue to deliver for Canadians. We're going to continue to step up with investments that are going to support Canadians, fight climate change, and build a brighter future for everyone.
Thank you very much. Savage silence. That's
The Honourable
greatly
Leader of the
appreciated.
Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this costly NDP carbon tax coalition, what's happened? What's up? Taxes up, costs up, crimes up, time's up. What Canadians need is hope. By choosing a common sense government that axes taxes, builds homes, fixes the budget, and stops the crime so they can earn powerful paychecks and pensions that buy affordable food, gas, and homes in safe neighborhoods protected by a strong military. Why can't we bring it home now?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, that little performance shows just how much the Leader of the Opposition loves his slogans, but actually doesn't put forward any.
I'm going to ask,
Fergus, sit down and
as
shut
I'd
the-
ask a previous
shut
member
up.
before, to please not take the floor unless they're recognized. I'm going to ask all members, please, to allow the member to. I'll ask the Prime Minister, Right Honourable Prime Minister, to start from the top.
Boy, Mr. Speaker, point out the performance of the Leader of the Opposition, and his colleagues get all upset because they know that he doesn't actually care about Canadians. He doesn't care about the programs we're delivering. He doesn't care about stepping up to support Canadians. He's actually in a bad mood because inflation has come down to 2%, Mr. Speaker, and it ruins his little just inflation slogan. He is so upset because he's cared about his own interests and not the interests of Canadians. We're going to stay focused on the things that matter for people while he spins little rhymes and tosses out his slogans. We'll take this seriously like we always have.
The scary part is that they're all standing up, smiling, applauding, thinking, I don't know what they're thinking.
If anyone had any doubt, it's definitely Wednesday. The
Canadian
Honourable
now.
Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the just inflation tagline works now better than ever. He can try to call himself Rocky Balboa and play fight songs to aggrandize himself as the star. But the people lined up at food banks, 2 million of them every month, know better. The people who are living in the 1,800 Ontario tent encampments know better. The 35 homeless encampments in Halifax, the people there know better. They know that we need to fire this costly carbon tax coalition so we can elect a common sense government that will bring it home for them.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, he sure loves to declaim about vulnerable people and perform his empathetic supposed concern. But the reality is he is using vulnerable people for his own political gains. If he actually cared about people, he wouldn't have voted against dental care for 700,000 seniors. He wouldn't have voted against a school food policy that's helping families with $800 worth of groceries a year. He's not making the investments in Canadians. He wants to cut programs, make Canadians suffer, so he can sit in the big chair.
Did he just call his own seat the big chair?
Allowed.
Order.
Order.
Fergus is such a loser. Watch him here. Watch him. Shh.
The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. The Prime Minister appointed a special envoy to fight Islamophobia, and she felt that her terms of reference included criticizing Quebec's universities for not providing for student security. Perhaps we don't see Islamophobia in the same way, because some would say that this position is, strictly speaking, a liberal activist and political position. So I'd like to ask the Prime Minister, what is his definition of Islamophobia? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, this government recognized that there was a rise in intolerance of all kinds all across the country, and we had a duty to recognize that and fight against it. That's why we appointed a special representative against Islamophobia and also a special rep against anti-Semitism. And we also recognize systemic discrimination in our institutions. So we have lots of challenges to face in bringing Canadians together and in addressing our challenges together to create a more peaceful and respectful country, the country that we now have. The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. This is no small thing. The Prime Minister does not know the definition of Islamophobia. Does he think that without a definition, criticizing Quebec universities reduces Islamophobia somehow? Or does it rather polarize Canadians and pit them against one another? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as the member opposite knows full well, I am a proud Quebecer, and I am proud that the Liberal Party of Canada has more Quebec members than the Bloc Québécois does. So we are proud Canadians, proud Quebecers, and we know that in every institution all across the country there are challenges around racism, systemic discrimination, and so on, and we need to address those issues, and that's the work we're doing, because we know everyone should feel included and respected within our country, and unfortunately we're seeing a rise in intolerance all across the country. So it's our duty, all of our duties, to come together and listen to one another. The honourable member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, all over the country, Conservative governments are privatizing our health care. They want people to have to pay to see a doctor, and it's no different in Quebec. But this Prime Minister is too weak to stand up to the Conservatives, and the people are the ones paying the price. What's it going to take for him to stand up to defend the principles of universal public health care?
Good day, Sheila. How are you? And welcome to Question Period.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we all know that the NDP is concerned about progressive values all across the country, but they can't deliver the goods. We were happy to work with them to deliver concrete things in healthcare, in childcare for Canadians, but unfortunately, they're the ones who decided to stop delivering the goods for Canadians. Progressive things are not always easy to accomplish, but we will continue fighting to do so. We will continue to defend our public health care system, and we will keep investing in the Canadian system. But unfortunately, the NDP can't say the same.
The honourable member for Cowichan, Malahat, Langford.
They are failing on health care and they are failing on groceries, because 1 year ago today, the Liberals met with Canada's grocery CEOs and promised to stabilize prices. A year later, prices are still up. Grocery CEOs are still gouging families struggling to put food on the table. Meanwhile, the Conservatives remain silent on grocery greed, and they want to give even more taxpayer money to these CEOs. Canadians are fed up. They are working harder and falling further behind. Why does this Prime Minister keep caving to CEOs while Canadians pay the price?
Hear, hear! The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the NDP is taking a page out of the Conservative playbook and choosing slogans rather than the hard work that will actually help Canadians. Right. We've delivered some of the most comprehensive reforms to the Competition Act in order to hold big grocers account for the work that they're doing in terms of delivering for Canadians. We've also moved forward on a national school food program that's putting more food in the bellies of 400,000 kids across the country as provinces come on board, and is going to save parents up to $800 on their grocery bills. These are things tangibly that we're busy delivering while they're playing politics.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
April 30th, 2014. Life in Canada, home of the world's most affluent middle class, the New York Times. Yet, today, almost a decade after that NDP Liberal Prime Minister has been in what he calls the big chair, Canada's GDP per capita is actually down, while the American one is up 19%. His carbon taxes are strangling growth. How could the solution possibly be to quadruple the tax to 61 cents a litre and send more jobs and businesses south?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we know the Leader of the Opposition doesn't believe in climate change and doesn't believe in putting more money in the pockets of Canadians with the Canada carbon rebate. How many wildfires, hurricanes, droughts are going to go after Canadians' lives and livelihoods before he understands you can't have a plan for the economy unless you have a plan for the environment?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He doesn't have a plan for either, as evidenced by the fact that he came completely unglued and started spitting out personal insults and crying, "Liar, liar, liar," on a radio station the other day when he learned that I had pointed to his own government report, which showed that his carbon tax will blow a $25 to $30 billion hole in our GDP. This was from a report that his government tabled in the House of Commons. If, in fact, his government is lying about the true cost of the carbon tax to our economy, then what is the true cost?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Parliamentary Budget Officer demonstrated that 8 out of 10 Canadian families do better with the Canada carbon rebate every 3 months than the cost of the price on pollution. And on top of that, Canadians know the price on pollution has brought down our emissions faster than any other G7 country at the same time as it is supporting Canadians in the middle class and working hard to join it. We're going to continue to fight climate change and invest in a strong economy for the future, while the Leader of the Opposition continues to deny climate change and cut programs and services that Canadians rely on.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, you can't sit in the big chair if you can't read your own government documents. Environment and Climate Change Canada carbon pollution pricing data tabled in this House by his government said that it will cost between $25 and $30 billion in lost GDP when this tax is implemented. A further document tabled by his Environment Minister on Carbon Tax 2 says there will be another $9 billion hole for a total of between $34 and $40 billion. Now he screams that this is all lies. Again, if his government documents are lying, what is the true cost of the carbon tax to our economy?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, every Canadian, except perhaps the Canadians in the Conservative Party of Canada, understand that the costs of inaction on climate change will be catastrophic, not just with wildfires, droughts, floods, hurricanes, but with lost economic opportunity, lost jobs, lost growth for Canadians as we solve the challenges of the 21st century. We are choosing to invest in a strong economy for the future. We're choosing to fight climate change and develop the solutions that the world's going to need to do that, while the Leader of the Opposition offers a do-nothing climate change plan that will cost Canadians billions.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
His carbon tax has not stopped a single flood, or single fire in this country. He's not stopped any natural disasters. What he has done is driven Canadians into poverty. quadrupling the tax to 61 cents a litre will cause a nuclear winter for our economy. Something that his carbon tax coalition partners in the NDP have voted to bring about. So if he really is so confident in a 61 cent a litre tax, why doesn't he call a carbon tax election and let Canadians decide?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the problem with the Leader of the Opposition is he believes in slogans. He just doesn't believe in climate change. The fact is, our plan to fight climate change is not just putting more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians across the country, but is bringing down emissions and creating jobs and opportunity for Canadians for generations to come. His climate change denialism, his do-nothing plan to fight climate change is going to hurt Canadians. We are going to continue to build a strong economy for the future because we know fighting climate change is part of it.
Thank you. 7 silence.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
But he's not fighting climate change. He's driving production out of Canada to more polluting for foreign jurisdictions, rather than our common sense plan to greenlight green projects that produce more energy around the world that displace emissions. That's a common sense approach. And he still won't answer the question, though, on the full cost of his 2 carbon taxes. I've cited government documents tabled in this House that say that it will total between $34 and $40 billion per year in lost GDP and jobs. If his government documents are wrong, then what is the true loss of GDP as a result of his 61 cent a litre carbon tax?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, he talks about driving investment out of Canada. He must be remembering his own time as minister, because since 2016, Mr. Speaker, foreign direct investment is up 60% in this country. Last year, we were 3rd in the world after the U.S. and Brazil, which makes us number 1 for foreign investment in the G20 per capita. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we are continuing to show the world that they can have confidence in Canada and in Canadians. Why doesn't he have confidence in Canadians? Why won't he invest in Canada?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Deputy Governor of the Bank of Canada said of Canada's investment problems, emergency break glass. Canadian workers get 55 cents of investment for every dollar American workers get, and only 65 cents for every dollar that an OECD worker gets. The gap between the Canadian and U.S. economy is now at a 100-year high after 9 years of the NDP Liberals. So one last time, his own documents show that his 61 cent a litre carbon tax will blow a $40 billion hole in our economy. If that number's not right, what is the real number?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again we see that the Leader of the Opposition is frustrated that international economists, climate experts, academics all back our plan to both fight climate change and grow a strong economy, while he's stuck with late-night far-right conspiracy YouTube videos. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we are delivering concretely to build a stronger future for Canadians, to fight climate change and to grow the economy, while he is hiding his head in the sand and refusing to admit even that climate change is real.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. A unanimous motion by the Quebec Assembly that education comes under Quebec's exclusive jurisdiction and hiring professors should be based on merit and certainly not based on religion. They reiterate that hiring based on religion is not only discriminatory, but it goes against state secularism. And the National Assembly repeats its request to have the Special Envoy on Islamophobia fired. I'd just like to remind all members, I know there was a lot of content in that question, and it's difficult for our interpreters to interpret all of that. And so we should speak at a speed that's reasonable for our interpreters. Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, let me be crystal clear. The universities have to hire the best possible people for the job. That's their job. But we also recognize that universities have policies that they've put in place to ensure that their staff reflect the diversity of the communities they serve. So I have full confidence in our universities, and we must always keep fighting systemic discrimination in all our institutions from coast to coast to coast. The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. Does it take 9 years to learn not to answer questions? The National Assembly of Quebec unanimously said that your person has insulted all of us. We're calling for her resignation. Are you on Ms. Gawabi's position against Quebec? Are you on her side and against the National Assembly of Quebec with all its elected representatives? If not, let it be known.
Le très honorable Premier Ministre.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. To suggest in this place that a member from Quebec elected by Quebecers does not represent his constituents is an insult to this very place, and the Bloc, which was elected to this place, should be ashamed of saying such a thing. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
2000 to 2014, Canadians attracted $30 to $100 billion more of American investment than the reverse. In the last 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, there have been $450 billion more Canadian dollars invested in the U.S. than the return. That's Canadian money billing U.S. pipelines, U.S. mines, U.S. businesses paying American workers with Canadian money. That is the consequence of a high carbon tax and a high energy price that drives jobs away. When will the Prime Minister learn that his radical plan to hike the tax to 61 cents a litre will destroy our economy further?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The problem with that argument, Mr. Speaker, is that the Leader of the Opposition doesn't understand that the International Monetary Fund and others have projected Canada to have stronger growth than the United States next year, despite the fact that we have a price on pollution, or perhaps because of the fact we have a price on pollution that is drawing in investment from around the world in the growing sectors of the economy to ensure good jobs in mining, in environmental research, in various industries, because we know the future is greener.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Our per capita GDP is smaller than it was 10 years ago, perhaps the first time since the Great Depression that has happened. He's had the worst economic growth since the Depression. The OECD says that Canada will have the worst economic growth this year and for the next 3 decades. Our economy has dropped more per capita since before COVID than any other G7 country. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. This Prime Minister wants to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre, which will be an economic catastrophe for this country.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what that little performance just showed is that the Leader of the Opposition is using his brokenest argument around Canada to explain why he would cut dental programs, cut child care, step away from any climate action, withdraw support to draw in investment. That's his excuse. The problem with that argument, however, Mr. Speaker, is Canada actually has the strongest fiscal position of any of the world's advanced economies, and our choice is putting that strong fiscal position in service of investment in Canadians, in dental, in childcare, in pharma, in...
The The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
There he goes again, telling Canadians they've never had it so good. It's never been so good for those 2 million people lined up at food banks. For the 1 million people every month that go to food banks in Ontario, record-smashing increases in homelessness by his own admission, after he promised a food program that hasn't delivered a single meal despite millions spent on bureaucracy. 1 in 4 kids line up at food banks. And now, the worst. He proposes to quadruple the carbon taxes on heat, housing, fuel, and food. How much, and how much will that take from our
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the problem that he will not the problem he has is that he cannot admit that the price on pollution puts more money back in the pockets of middle-class Canadians and those working hard to join it. He continues to spew the line that Canada is broken, and whenever I point out that we have a strong fiscal balance sheet that we should be putting in service of programs and supports for Canadians, he says, no, we need cuts. That is not the path forward for Canada, and that's the choice Canadians get to make. Do we go with austerity and cuts to programs, or do we invest in Canadians and their future?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Canadians who can't eat, heat, or house themselves are living in austerity now. And as to his false PMO talking point about 8 out of 10 Canadians being better off, it conveniently excludes the $25 billion per year in economic costs that his own government admits that the carbon tax imposes on Canadians. And that's why 6 in 10 Canadian families and 100% of the middle class are worse off with his carbon tax. So his documents show Canadians are worse off. If he doesn't have confidence in his own government documents, how can this House have confidence in his government?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Millions of Canadians across the country have received the Canada carbon rebate checks that puts more money in their pockets every 3 months than it costs them on average on the price on pollution. That allows us not only to fight climate change and boost our economy in strong ways that create the innovative solutions that the world is going to increasingly rely on, but it helps Canadians with affordability at a challenging time. He would eliminate those Canada carbon rebate checks and put forward no plan to fight climate change. That's not how you build the future for Canada.
The Honourable Member from Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, under the Liberals, housing prices in Winnipeg are out of control. The average rent for a one-bedroom suite in Winnipeg increased over 22% since last year, the largest jump in the country. Corporate landlords are buying up affordable housing and jacking up rents because they know they have support of both the Liberals and the Conservatives. Well, I can tell you one thing, Mr. Speaker, they are not the answer to our housing crisis. So my question to the Prime Minister, why is he allowing corporate landlords to price people out of their homes?
Hear, hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I very much look forward to working with the NDP Premier of Manitoba on Renters' Bill of Rights. We just presented a number of measures that will directly help renters, like ensuring that rent is counted towards calculation of credit scores so people can get a mortgage, by protecting renters from landlords. We recognize, as I'm sure do the NDP, that that is largely a provincial jurisdiction, but I'm very glad to hear that the Premier of NDP, the NDP Premier of Manitoba will be stepping up to work with the federal government on delivering for Canadians in Manitoba and indeed right across the country.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton-Griesbach.
What is in provincial jurisdiction is what's happening in Edmonton-Griesbach, where the federal government is set to bulldoze hundreds of homes in my community so that developers get rich. These homes are on public land and are some of the last affordable units in my city due to decades of Liberal and Conservative cuts. Families like Kim's, a single mom raising a child with a family with a member of with a disability, is scared she will be homeless. Will the Prime Minister stop the dem evictions, stop selling off land land to rich developers and build the homes that people can actually afford.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our government put forward one of the most ambitious investments in housing that this country has ever seen. And we are happy to work hand in hand with the NDP to make sure that public lands get used for affordable housing, that we're doing everything we can to push back against provinces that are attacking public affordability of homes. We would very much like to continue working with the NDP on this matter. They're choosing to play politics with the Conservatives and put politics first. We're going to continue to work to make sure that his residents in Edmonton, Griesbach, and indeed right across the country get better affordability, better homes, because that's what this federal government is focused on, not politics.
The Honourable Member from Kingston and the Islands.
Mr. Speaker, earlier this month, the U.S. Department of Justice revealed that Russia is funneling money to conservative media figures to push their far-right propaganda. This is a clear threat to our democracy and Canada's national security. And yet, the leader of the Conservative Party...
I'm going to ask the Honourable Member to please take a seat.
Did you want me to have your attention with a poll?
I would ask... I would like to ask all honourable members to please not take their time out of turn on both sides of the House so that we can hear the question that's being asked. I'm going to invite the honourable member from Kingston and the Islands to start from the top so that the Speaker can hear the questions. And I ask all members to please hold with their comments. The honourable member from Kingston and the Islands.
Mr. Speaker, earlier this month, the U.S. Department of Justice revealed that Russia is funneling money to conservative media figures to push a far-right propaganda. This is a clear threat to our democracy and Canada's national security. And yet, the leader of the Conservative Party is directing his MPs to block the Public Safety Committee's study on this real issue. Can the Prime Minister tell this House what our government is doing to protect Canadians from this very real threat of foreign interference?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for Kingston and the Islands for his advocacy on this unbelievably important issue. It's extremely alarming that Russia is pushing its propaganda in our democracy, but even more appalling that they are using far-right Canadian conservative influencers to divide Canadians. We must all stand against this. I call on all parties, including the Conservative Party of Canada, to stand up and investigate these allegations and follow up on it. Let it get through committee.
Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Under 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, housing costs have doubled. Now, he said he was going to create a $4 billion fund to give to cities to speed up home building. So he gave Toronto City Hall $500 million. What did they do? Hiked building taxes by 42%. He gave Ottawa City Hall $200 million, so they could hike taxes by 11%. He gave Mississauga City Hall $113 million, so they could hike taxes by 22%. Why does he keep funding bloated local government gatekeepers that block housing rather than building the homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let us not take any lessons from that failed Harper housing minister who didn't get anything built while he was on the job. We're going to continue to do what he didn't, which is working with cities, working with provinces and territories, working with nonprofits to get homes built.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
They're not being built. In fact, housing construction is down, way down. And he should take lessons from everyone because he has the worst housing inflation in Canadian history, and by far the worst housing inflation in the G7 after 9 years in power. And now he's bloating up the same bureaucracies that have given us the slowest building permits in the G7. Why won't he follow my common sense plan to link federal dollars to housing completions to incentivize local governments to speed up permits, free up land, and actually cut building taxes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition's so-called housing plan was universally panned by experts, which is why it failed in this House of Commons. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we have been working with premiers, working with municipalities, working with nonprofits to turn the ship around that he neglected when he was so-called housing minister. The reality is we are delivering for Canadians. We have a lot more work to do, and his slogans and divisive attacks aren't going to get any homes built for anyone.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, when I was housing minister, the average home price was $450,000. The rent was $950 for a one-bedroom, $1,100 for a two-bedroom. It's now doubled to over $2,000. And we built almost 200,000 homes at those rock-bottom low prices. So now, fast forward a decade, 28% of Canadians tell a RE/MAX survey they're considering leaving the country because of housing inflation doubling under this Prime Minister. So why doesn't he get his gatekeepers out of the way and follow my common sense plan to build the homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, like in so many of his plan consists entirely of slogans and personal attacks on me, on mayors, on Canadians who are working to get things done. We are investing in partnership with municipalities to change zoning laws, to invest in public lands, to support nonprofits to build more units. I was just in Vancouver meeting with the extraordinary folks of the Vancouver Chinatown Foundation that are delivering a unit that this young woman can now live in and afford because of investments this federal government has delivered. We're going to be there for Canadians while he's there for himself.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
La semaine dernière.
Last week, a woman was stabbed near a hard drugs injection site, the Maison Benoît Labre, near a primary school. This tragedy could have been avoided if the Prime Minister had accepted what I asked around 3 months ago. I asked for hard drug injection sites to be closed and for money to be invested in drug treatment. Will the Prime Minister finally close down this hard drug injection site, which is right near a school? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, all Canadians deserve to live in safe communities, and that is a responsibility we take seriously. But part of taking a challenge like this seriously is listening to experts and listening to people working on the front lines of the opioid and toxic drug crisis in order to help people to get through these difficult times. Yes, we need to invest in help for these people. We also need to invest in ways to protect Canadians. We will base what we do on science and evidence, not on ideology and politics. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, I would like the Prime Minister to tell me from what date to what date he was part of the National Assembly of Quebec. I don't seem to recall it, but if all of the parties here want to fight Islamophobia and polarization, they should consider adopting legislation tabled by the Bloc Québécois, which would put an end to the religious grounds for hate speech. Will the Prime Minister accept that before it's too late for him? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the Bloc Québécois keeps insisting on this. But he has just said very clearly that federal MPs from Quebec have less legitimacy than members in the National Assembly of Quebec. Well, I might really ask myself, hell, what is the Bloc Québécois doing here if they have so little legitimacy? I would like to invite the Prime Minister to withdraw this unparliamentary language. I'm sure he can use other words to express his point. He has 10 seconds left. Mr. Speaker, I'm being very clear. We are here to defend Quebec's interests in Ottawa at the federal level. I don't know what my colleague is even doing here if he doesn't think he has legitimacy to speak for Quebec.
Avant qu'on continue,
Before going on, this is an important point. I would just like to ask the Prime Minister to withdraw the unparliamentary language. And the Right Honourable Prime Minister said, I withdraw the word. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Oh, the Right Honourable Prime Minister. No, I'm sorry. I used the expression mot de comprendre to describe what I said, but that's not accurate. I used a different word. I would like to withdraw that. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, perhaps I was not clear, or perhaps Mr. Trudeau... No, I'm sorry. Yes, I know that the Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly is a very experienced member. Of course, he made a mistake. I would invite him to start over again and to respect the rules of this place. Yes, I withdraw that vulgar language.
Monsieur le Président, le Premier ministre est la preuve.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is living proof that we need to do more to protect French because he didn't understand what I said. I would like Parliament to adopt legislation that would put an end to religious exemptions. He is a Quebec MP here in Ottawa. He should pay attention to the fact that this is what Quebec wants.
le très honorable Premier ministre.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, in our federal system, the reality is that we have Quebec MPs elected to represent Quebec. And they do that in Quebec, in the National Assembly, but they can also represent Quebec in Ottawa and represent other Canadians as well. As a proud Quebecer, I will continue to do my job to protect my constituents in Papineau, and I will also be there to pay close attention to the well-being of the entire country.
Honorable chef de l'opposition.
Quote, children are not able to buy alcohol. They're not able to buy marijuana or cigarettes, but they can have access to crack pipes and kits to be able to do so-called safe injection. It's just wrong. These are the words of the stepfather of Brianna McDonald, the 13-year-old girl who lost her life to a drug overdose in Abbotsford after she was denied treatment but offered drug paraphernalia by the authorities. When will the Prime Minister end this radical agenda, close the drug dens, defund unsafe supply, and treat addiction to bring our loved ones home drug-free?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, tragedies like that are unthinkable, and we need to do everything we can as orders of government to bring them to an end, to protect kids, to protect communities, to protect vulnerable people. That's why we work hand in hand with local authorities, with provincial authorities on the plans that will suit them, that will keep communities safe. We know there's not one size fits all solution. We know that ideology isn't the answer. Only the application of science, of compassion, of investments that will help people through this terrible epidemic.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this young girl's family begged hospital treatment for their vulnerable teenager. Instead, she was given drug paraphernalia. This is all part of the radical experiment that the Prime Minister and the NDP have imposed. and have contributed to 47,000 drug overdose deaths, with the biggest increases in the places where this approach has been tried. Alberta has reduced overdoses by 50% with treatment. Why won't he follow the science and back the plans that work?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
For anyone puzzled by the link or the not link to federal jurisdiction in that question, that was an ad in support of John Rustad, the BC Conservative leader who's about to be in a campaign, the leader of the opposition continues to focus on ideology while we roll up our sleeves, work with partners on delivering solutions for Canadians. We need to lead with compassion and science, and that is what we will always do.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it is federal because this federal Prime Minister has offered a criminal code and Controlled Drugs and Substances Act exemption to allow the drug dens to go ahead, and he has spent hundreds of millions of dollars on tax-funded, unsafe supply that is killing our people and addicting our kids. It's just like on car theft, where he's brought in catch and release and house arrest for career car thieves. Today, he has a chance to reverse himself and vote for Common Sense Bill C-379 to bring in mandatory jail time for career car thieves. Will he do the right thing?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, we see a return to the failed Stephen Harper tough-on-crime policies that don't work, Mr. Speaker. Mandatory minimums struck down by the Supreme Court don't work. What has worked, Mr. Speaker, is increasing the number of scanners after Stephen Harper's government cut them, increasing the investments in policing, in AI to process and discover which containers will have cars in them, to crack down on auto theft, to step up with science and solutions instead of just flailing around and using the same failed Harper playbook.
The Honourable Member from Laval, Alfred Pellan.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians are going through a housing crisis, and our government is proposing real solutions to do something about it. In November, we signed a $1.8 billion agreement with the government of Quebec to provide housing. Can the Prime Minister tell us about the results of that agreement, which will deliver in my riding, Alfred Pellan, and throughout Quebec? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for Alfred Pellan. He has worked hard for this important file. In November, we signed a historic $1.8 billion agreement with the government of Quebec to speed up construction of 8,000 housing units. We know that we can only fix the housing crisis if all levels of government work together. The Conservative leader's plan on housing is risible. In fact, it has been mocked by all experts. He wants to tear up the agreement with Quebec. He's not serious on housing. Instead, he's attacking Quebec elected officials. There's a lot of work left for him to do with these paltry policies of his.
In 2015, Ahmed Faoud Mustafa El-Didi appeared in an ISIS torture video dismembering a human body on a crucifix. Yet in 2018, this NDP Liberal government let him in, later giving him citizenship, only to find from French authorities that he was plotting a massive terrorist attack on people living in the Toronto area. Also, this last several weeks, we learned that another potential terrorist gained access as under a student visa to plan an attack on New York City Jews. Why won't the Prime Minister reverse the damage he's done to our borders, secure our country, and stop the terrorism?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if the Leader of the Opposition was genuinely serious in his concern for national security, he would choose to get the top-secret clearance that we have offered him instead of putting forward this little performance. We, on this side of this House, don't play politics with national security.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, carbon tax Carney is already getting his way. Only days after he took on the unofficial and unelected role as finance minister, we learned that the company that he chairs is now seeking $10 billion federal Canadian tax dollars, money to control Canadians' pensions. So he's gone from carbon tax Carney to conflict of interest Carney, and now coincidence Carney. Will the Prime Minister cut loose carbon tax Carney and call a carbon tax election so Canadians can choose their future?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Hard pivot away from his security clearance, Mr. Speaker. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, he is jealous that top-notch economists and world-renowned experts back our plan to fight climate change and grow the economy, but he's stuck with late-night far-right conspiracy videos on YouTube.
The Honourable Leader.
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Carbon tax Carney has nothing to hide. Then he would simply sign up and have an ethics clearance and an ethics committee review. We've tried to bring him to the ethics committee, mais le Bloc québécois a travaillé avec les libéraux pour
The Bloc québécois worked with the Liberals to stop that.
Follow the conflict of interest law, but the Prime Minister refuses to swear him in as a public servant. So, if there is no conflict of interest, why won't carbon tax Carney do a full job as a public servant that can be scrutinized by our Ethics Commission rather than fleecing Canadians?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
So get this, Mr. Speaker. He's really cheesed that we didn't hire him on for the government payroll. That Mark Carney has chosen to step up to fight with the Liberal Party against the reckless and dangerous economic plans of the Conservative Party should be an example to all Canadians. People across the country are beginning to see how ridiculous and dangerous the ideas that the Leader of the Opposition are putting forward and are stepping up to roll up their sleeves and fight back against that brokenist, austere vision of not helping Canadians, of hurting Canadians, of going back to a time where Canadians didn't have the bright future.
The Honourable Member from Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker, rental markets and home prices in communities across the country are making it difficult for Canadians to find an affordable place to live. The current systems in place to guide Canadians while they make these important purchases or protect them are not enough. Can the Prime Minister tell us what protection Canadians will find in the new blueprints for renters and home buyers' Bill of Rights?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for Brampton South for her advocacy on this important issue. This week, we released the blueprints for a renter's Bill of Rights and a home buyer's Bill of Rights. It lays out a plan to help protect renters from unfair practices like rent evictions and excessive rent increases, something the Conservative leader couldn't care less about. The Conservative leader is a failed Harper housing minister with a laughable record. Lazy politicians come up with lazy policies and failed results. That's exactly what the Leader of the Opposition is after offering Canadians.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, people living in Gaza and the West Bank continue to suffer unbearable atrocities, and Canadians have been pleading with this government to do more to promote peace for both Israelis and Palestinians. And today, the Liberals had a chance. Today they had a chance, and yet they failed to support a UN vote that demanded that Israel end its unlawful occupation of Palestinian territories. Once again, they're choosing whose human rights matter. Why are the Liberals refusing to uphold international law and protect the lives of Palestinians?
Hear, hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, there has been too much suffering, from Hamas's horrific attacks on October 7th to the heartbreaking catastrophe in Gaza. It has to end. We call for an immediate ceasefire, the release of all hostages, an urgent increase in humanitarian assistance in Gaza, and for Palestinian civilians to be protected. We need to return to a path to peace based on a two-state solution where Israelis and Palestinians can live side by side in peace and security.
The honourable member from Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, it's been over a decade since my community was promised two-way, all-day GO train service from Kitchener to Toronto. Yet we still don't even have a timeline for completion. Folks in my community are stuck on overcrowded buses that are getting worse and worse each year. The federal government has already committed 40% of the project costs. That's over $750 million. Will the Prime Minister join me and local community leaders in calling for accountability from Premier Ford and to push for a timeline for project completion?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I thank the member for his question. Indeed, this government has put record amounts of infrastructure investment on the table to support Canadians in building transit, in building the infrastructure that they need to get to and from work, to be able to afford better homes closer to work. These are the things that we're continuing to invest in, and we call on all premiers to step up in their investments, to work with us on investing, to not listen to their Conservative colleague in Ottawa who wants to cut and underinvest in infrastructure. Instead, work with us to invest in a stronger future for all Canadians.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Liberal government chose to fund a Russian propaganda film.
Oh, well, they are shutting us down. That was a point of order, and I guess that's not going to be included in today's feed. Anyhow, welcome to all the new viewers. Welcome back to all the people that are returning. It should be interesting. Like this next session over the next couple of months should be it's not too late for our country, guys. It's not too late. We can get this back on track. Anyhow, guys, we're out. We'll catch you next time.
You should do exercises. That's important to our good health. And friends, tomorrow we are going to be visiting with a fisherman who will tell us about his very enjoyable hobby. Now, I would like to see you all through our magic mirror. Romper, bumper, stomper, boo, tell me, do. Magic mirror, please tell me today, did all of my friends have fun at play? I see all of my friends in Alberta. It's nice to see you. And I see Dan and Vivian. I see Marlon and Mona. I see Catherine and Harley. I see Anne and Elizabeth and Jane. I see Bert and Nicole, and I see you too. I hope to see you tomorrow, right here in Romper Room.
Bing bong, knock knock, hey daddy do. Bing bong, tick tock, bebop boom.
Kick off your weekend with exciting CFL action when the Edmonton Eskimos tackle the BC Lions in Vancouver. Tomorrow night at 10:30 on CFTO TV.
Ding dong, knock knock, hey daddy do. Tip tap, pitter pat, granny cat too. Rooty toot, kimble, loopy loo. Bobbity stoppity, romper room and friends.
All right, gang, we're out for today. Thank you for watching. Oh, we've got the Beachcombers. We'll finish up with that.
It's time for a change in this country, my friends, a real change.
WTF.
Here, here.